Thank you for joining us today. I'm Stan van Hoof. I'm from Exclusive Networks, and today we're going to do a product update about Drata. For some of you, maybe Drata is still new, so we also do a small introduction about what the product does. But I'm not alone today, thank God. I've brought Andreas van Niemen, who is a Drata channel manager for our region.
Yeah, hi everyone. As Stan said, my name's Andreas. I know I sound very American. I'm not. I am Belgian, but indeed I'm recently promoted to channel business manager for the Benelux and Nordics regions here at Drata.
All right, so let's get started. I'm just support act, so the main act is Andreas, of course, who's gonna show you the platform and the new stuff about it. But I just want to say that we embrace the drink your own champagne instead of eat your own dog food. We prefer champagne, and we are a Drata customer. Meaning we're a big company. We're over 2,500 people. We have a global presence, which means we have a lot of local regulations that we need to comply to. Which is a nightmare, to be honest. Every country has its own specifics. And we do a lot of business. We have over 25,000 partners, meaning that a lot of those partners actually are asking us for information about how compliant we are, that we need to provide evidence, we need to fill in security questionnaires, and our GRC team has, those questions all the time. Next slide, please, Andreas. So my first experience with Drata as from an operational standpoint was to onboard a new vendor. I'm responsible to look at new technologies and also onboarding new security vendors. And to do that and to work together, they ask me, okay, we want to work with you, but you need to put in some information. And they created an account for me on a platform where I need to fill in a lot of information. And I need to answer a questionnaire, a security questionnaire. It was over 120 questions. So I wasn't that keen on starting that. So I asked our GRC team, and they just give me like access to the Drata platform, only this specific part of it, to answer security questionnaires. So you have to know that we use Drata as a GRC tool, and all our information about compliancy is in that tool, meaning that they know all the answers to that question. So I just had to upload it to the security questionnaire, and all those questions were automatically answered because we already have that data in the platform. The Drata tool was actually able to answer those questions. So instead of spending more than a day filling all these questions, Drata did this in less than 10 minutes. So I think that's a cool example, and there are many other ways that they can save your time, but this is really a cool example how your technology can help you scale and make sure you save time in the process. So this was my introduction, and now I'll leave it to Andreas.
Oh boy, all right, all eyes on me. No, great, thank you so much, Stan. Thank you everyone else for being here as well. Some names I recognize, some names I don't. So great to meet people. What I'd like to go through today, just in the interest of sort of full information, making sure we're all on the same level, I'm just going to start with a brief introduction of Drata, who we are, what we're trying to do, and a little bit of how we do it. Next, I'm honestly going to brag a little bit. We just turned 4 officially, and we have some very exciting numbers next to that. Then I'd like to talk a little bit about what we're seeing in the market, in the actual GRC world. What are the issues that we're running into, and then how we're actually answering those. Right? This is supposed to be partially a product update that's going in there as well. We do have new features and functions in there, and a lot of these are built based on the issues that we're seeing in the market. We really try to take that feedback in, internalize it, and then bring something out that's actually going to make a difference in the market, as opposed to changing the size of a button or making it look a little bit better every day. And then we'll always just have some space for Q&A as well after the demo. Perfect. For those who don't know, who is Drata? What do we do? Drata, we are a trust automation platform. Now, the word trust is a little bit heavily loaded, I like to say. We used to call ourselves a GRC automation platform, governance, risk, and compliance automation. But at this point, we've expanded our horizons so much that I think we've started calling it trust, mostly because it incorporates more than just your internal GRC system. We're really trying to be a trust layer between companies, a way that it used to be meeting up with a customer face to face in order to say, well, you can trust us, we can do this together, to providing certifications to one another, to going a whole step further, opening your doors more to the specific people you want to, and really being able to say, we are together in this. We are one ecosystem together, and that's what we're trying to do. So in short, what Drata is trying to do is we're really trying to build you from 0 to 100 and beyond with compliance. That means taking you from the basic steps of what is a compliance framework, which ones are you looking at, to the policies and personnel that you need to be looking at, to automated security monitoring and testing, all the way to providing that information to your third parties, answering those questionnaires, and allowing compliance to become a business driver. Now, the way that we do this isn't alone, as much as we like to talk about what we do. It's specifically done with this giant ecosystem that we've built. We have the largest trust ecosystem in the market. The amount of technology partners, auditing partners that we have, managed service providers and resellers that we have, has built this ecosystem where we're able to lean on one another and really sort of raise the entire tide for everyone. Now you'll see here specifically security questionnaires and managed security services that's in here. There used to be logos in here that we would also always put in. Security questionnaires was something we couldn't do ourselves until very recently, with technology that we built ourselves also being augmented by an acquisition that I'll talk about in a second. And managed security service providers. This is where you come in. This is where partners come in. We have a team. We're not trying to be this massive sales team that's trying to do everything. We're doing this together in the market. We are a compliance platform, not a security platform, but one should lead to the other. So being able to work with these managed service providers is the only way that we can do that. So in short, what is Drata? We're a trust automation platform. We're trying to be that layer between companies, and we're trying to make it a better place where we can indeed trust each other, understand what everyone's doing with their data, and really try and fix any issues that might be happening along a supply chain as well. To really talk about this and sort of understand how we do things differently, we need to look at how compliance is being done today. I'd say that probably over 90% of the market, and this is backed up by external testing as well, is doing compliance in a very manual approach. What I mean by that is someone gets a request to become compliant. Right? A customer is asking you to become compliant to provide data retention information, for instance. What ends up happening is that request filters down to someone who finally says yes, typically an IT manager, and that person then gets to go read a book and figure out what's needed, ask everyone internally how this gets sorted, find that evidence for someone, make sure it's compliant, and then bring it back through that whole tunnel in order to get back to that customer. They're then managing this in spreadsheets, saying, hey, I've made a SharePoint environment, I've put in 20 Excel sheets, and now you get to go fill it in. And you might ask help from people, you might take screenshots, you might need to teach a lot of people internally how these things are done. And every single step is manual. It's trying to understand something. It's building an information silo where probably this IT manager, maybe a GRC manager, has all the information, and everybody else just sort of has to listen to that. That poses the problem that one, most of their time is going to be spent on manual work as opposed to the knowledge that they have. And two, if they ever leave, you don't have a backup plan. Good luck understanding spreadsheets that you've never worked in. Right? And this is how compliance happens today. What we see at Drata is that we've tried to sort of flip the script on this. What we've actually done is we've started by understanding the regulations. Right? That could be SOC 2, that could be ISO 27001, NIS2, DORA, Cyber Fundamentals, you name it. But what we've done in Drata is we've actually taken a controls approach. So what we've done is we've said, what is the theory of that regulation and how does that translate to compliance best practices in a company? By mapping out these controls accurately, we're then able to build tests that provide automated evidence to this, saying, how do I prove that I'm doing this practical task in a more repetitive manner? And if we have those tests and we can see this evidence, then we're able to validate and understand how those controls function. Are we following our policies? Are we doing the right thing in the organization? And that feedback loop keeps going. Being able to provide it continuously is where the entire market is working towards. Right? If you're doing this in this kind of way, having accurate, up-to-date evidence, understanding and having control of your controls, ironically enough, then you can start talking about trust management. Then you can start talking about, well, why are we doing all this work? Well, you might be doing this work for an audit. Maybe you work with BMW and you need to be TSAC certified to do business with them. Maybe you have a lot of risk management questions. Your CFO is heavily based on risks. A lot of the frameworks you need are based on risk, all of the ISOs, for instance. But having that evidence makes that a lot easier. And the final way is bringing that trust to the market. It's showing the customers you're working with or prospective customers you're working with what you're doing. Being able to be confident in the way that you're managing things. But that's only possible because you have this continuous monitoring and evidence collecting happening in the middle. Now, that's short how Drata works. A lot of people get bored by GRC. I think that's why, as a company, we're so successful, but we're very excited about it. Last month marked 4 years. Now, what have we done in just under 4 years? We've breached 100 million ARR. That's annual recurring revenue. This is a number that probably only 5 other companies on the planet currently have ever done in this amount of time. Of that 100 million, we have 2.5 million unique users. These are 2.5 million customers within the larger organizations that we're supporting. And on top of that, we've had over 10,000 audits run in Drata. That means 10,000 audits where we've saved time, or we've saved customers or reported 80% of their hours on just the audits alone. A quote of one of our customers, Tenable, who a lot of people might recognize, is that we've allowed GRC to become a business enabler, as opposed to just seeing it as a cost center, as a thing that you need to do to maintain a relationship with BMW, for instance. It's becoming something that enables you. It's providing you this more holistic approach, and it's cutting away all of those manual processes. When you cut those away, people are able to work better, they're able to work smarter, and they stay longer. That was enough bragging. That's all the bragging I'm going to do today. Next, I really want to dive into what we're seeing in the market. Now, as mentioned, we have a massive engineering team. I think as a company, we're between 600 and 700 people. Over half of that is engineering. Over half of that are people who are building the platform better, who are adding features, who are adding functionality that expands, again, moving from this GRC pure focus to a trust focus, being able to go broader and more and answer the questions that people want answered. What we've actually seen is this shift towards what we call a compliance culture. By that, we mean everyone's starting to talk about it and look at it. It's driving business, it's driving transactions, it's decisions being made on it. So much so that last year in 2024 alone, we noticed that 1/3 of all companies reported losing business because they were missing a certification, right? They were missing an ISO norm. They were missing SOC 2. When we start looking at 2025, we're going to start seeing this number increasing because the questions are going to come out, are you NIS2 compliant? And can you prove it right now? Are you DORA compliant? And can you prove it right now? And any of those new regulations. Now, if the number's that big, you might ask the question, why isn't everyone just compliant overnight? You probably all know this, but a lot of customers don't. But it's because realistically, it's expensive and it's a lot of work. Right? The trends that we're seeing in the market is regulations are expanding, customer expectations are increasing, and then the total cost of getting anyone internally is increasing as well. In 2024 alone, before NIS2 was launched, we noticed that frameworks were growing their controls by 55%. Right? Now, how can this happen? Right? It's ISO 27001 who is adding more controls. SOC 2 that's adding more controls. This is before we start accounting for things like NIS2 and SIFUN and DORA. Now, why are they increasing controls? It's because the attack surface keeps expanding. There's new technologies, new tools, new platforms. A good example is the use of AI. 2024, we saw this gigantic growth with things like OpenAI and ChatGPT. Suddenly, you started hearing that companies were uploading confidential information into ChatGPT to try and gain insights from the AI. That's a risk. That's something that these security platforms are looking at. Because the risk, while it could be internal to your company, you might have information from one of your vendors, from one of your suppliers, from any third party, and you might be putting that into AI. And that could be a risk for them as well. So these number of controls keep expanding, which means the work that you're doing to prove is expanding, but no one's really paying attention to that, except for the people who are in it every single day. Next to that, customer expectations. we're seeing requests for compliance only increasing. There's this zero trust culture going on in the world as well. There's a lot of, I'm going to say, fear in the market about being breached, how companies are using this information. And the way to tackle that is by providing things like internationally recognized certification. Being able to say, well, if you're ISO compliant, I know what kind of minimums you've reached. But we're seeing that companies are expecting this more. Right? More deals are being done, and the final check is that you are indeed compliant. And if you're not, a CFO probably won't sign off on it. These are the things that we keep seeing growing. And then finally, the total cost. Over 75% of companies last year that were polled were spending over 1,000 hours on compliance. Over 1,000 hours that you probably have someone whose core job isn't compliance working on it. That's an IT manager who, instead of managing IT, is chasing screenshots to prove that they've already done all of that work. It's having your legal counsel that's answering questions on how they're allowed to word policies, as opposed to managing legal contracts and similar things. But the issue doesn't stop there. The people who know anything about compliance, those costs are going up. So if you're focused on one smart person who's been a rock star and done it the whole time, that person's going to get poached, because companies are paying more and more to get these people on their books. If you lose that person, your entire compliance program falls flat. Suddenly those 1,000 hours are going to be eaten up by more people and probably increasing. The way that we see it is a little bit different, right? What we're trying to see with all these growing controls, the growing costs, all of those things, I can kind of break down into 4 points. The first one is scalability. Drata allows you to have control mappings that overlap different frameworks, that make it much easier to run through an audit in a way where you don't have to be repeating work the entire time. Adding that scalability, so if you do get 55% more control, it won't be spread across all of these different frameworks. It won't be repeating work and trying to figure out new things. It's more going to be expansion in what you're already doing and existing. Next to that, all of that work internally, understanding the different departments and the different silos, it's being able to automate tasks and workflows across them, increasing collaboration, that your IT manager doesn't have to chase HR and legal and operations and keep going back and forth with information, but that everyone's moving towards the same goal. The third is that you're centralizing more. Instead of having 30 different Excel sheets spread across SharePoint, your operations guy has some screenshots saved on his desktop somewhere, you have someone else with information. No, you're bringing that central so you can answer these questions and build trust faster. And finally, it's being able to brag about it. It's being able to show your compliance. It's being able to let compliance work for you as opposed to working for it. Having all of this centralized and streamlined makes it much easier to drive business outcomes. At the end of the day, you want to be leveraging trust. You want to be building trust so that you can keep doing more business and get better results. That's enough pure blah, blah and slides out of me, I think. I'm now going to switch over to a demo. I believe everyone can see the demo in front of them now. I don't imagine the teams would be having any issues with this. Stan, can you confirm?
Yeah, it works.
Perfect, perfect. Now, for those unfamiliar with Drata, this is our console. Drata is cloud hosted. We are hosted within the EU, so we have data centers in Germany, for instance, to do all of this. But we are a cloud-based solution. On this demo, I'm not going to go through absolutely every single step of Drata, but I'd like to focus on some of the newer features and some of the ways of working that should be interesting to the audience that we have here today. Next to that as well, at the end, I'll talk just a little bit about vision and some of the things that we're working on right now that could be of a very big interest to the market here as well. Great. With Drata, most of the times that people start, they ask, well, what do I do first? Where should I really be looking within Drata? Luckily, we have this quick start guide within here as well, which very much talks about the things that you should be doing. There'll be basic things to start, like company information, adding in some of your connectors, such as identity providers, infrastructure providers, and the like, selecting which frameworks you want to be looking for, checking in on your personnel, doing your policies, and then really working through your controls. But as you see, effectively, the first step is setting up these connections. Now, people who know Drata and people who don't, the connections that we set up are based on native APIs. What you might understand in this is that we connect with cloud platforms. So if you're looking at something like identity providers, you're looking at cloud-based identity providers, your Google Workspaces, your Oktas, your your Microsoft 365, Entra ID, whatever name they're using today for it. Next to that, infrastructure, oftentimes very cloud focused. Being able to connect into the Azure stack with a simple native API is very easy. One of the things that we keep seeing from some of our larger customers, even the smaller ones, is everyone still has something on premise, something that they probably want to be checking on premise. Now, Drata can save you enough time that having to do a few manual checks might not be that important, but we've still listened. Something that's in beta right now is what we call custom connections, which you can see here in the top right. What this actually allows you to do is open up a push request into Drata. What this means is you can name this anything. This could be your local data center. Maybe that's what you're looking for. Maybe your data source is that local DC. It's the first one you have. Maybe you have multiple. And what you're able to do is you're able to provide us either the JSON schema or a sample of that information within Drata so that we can understand what that JSON schema would be. Now, from there, you create an API key, but this means we've now opened ourselves as an ingestion engine. This means that whether you're looking at potentially local data centers, the sort of security compliance areas that you're looking for standard within Drata, or you're starting to look beyond that. Maybe you have questions about OT security. Maybe you have questions about IoT security, quality management systems. Maybe you have your own internally built framework that you're trying to check that maps out all of these things. Even if we don't have a custom connector, you can build this kind of ingestion engine very quickly and very easily to understand this kind of information. I'll show you more about what we can do with this information in a second. But this is something very exciting that's coming out, having these potentially on-premise connectors or just connectors to other tools that you might be looking at in here as well. It allows us to cover a broader variety of tooling and cover more, focus on more than just security compliance today. Also good to note within Drata, if you ever have any questions, you always have access to support. You always have access to solutions architects, technical support, who will be able to help you with any questions about this. Now, when we look at Drata in general, right, we've gone through the connections. Maybe we've managed our policies within Drata, as you can see here. Maybe we've gotten all of our personnel to sign off on these policies. That would be great. But where most people are going to do their work is within these controls. Now, we make a distinction between frameworks, controls, and monitors. I'm going to start in the middle here with control, and that's because this is where people spend their day-to-day. If I take, for instance, ISO 27001, I can filter on just these controls. I can then filter on which ones are not ready, for instance, but might have monitors attached to it, automated testing that's running. I could filter this in a whole lot of ways. Maybe there's ones that just have approval levels, or that's evidence specifically to it, or there's tickets assigned to it. You have a lot of filters to understand what you need to be doing. To best show you the power of these kind of controls and how broad Drata can go, I'm going to take a data retention policy. Now, I'm going to take this as a specific control because this is typically going to be a lot of work in an organization. Something that one of the last deals that I did when I was still in sales, one of the questions that came up was sort of the way of working that compliance has been built for them. Essentially, what had happened was this was an organization who didn't really have compliance needs in the beginning, but all of a sudden, one of their customers said, hey, we need to be extra compliant, so we're asking you for information. So the customer asked this company to the CEO, hey, can you tell me about your data retention? I need to understand how this data retention is because that's important for my business. So the CEO went internally and he asked the COO, and the CEO went down. They kept going down and they reached an IT manager and said, hey, you're in charge of IT. What's our data retention like? And the IT manager said, well, we keep it for 12 months. They went, great. And it went back up the pipe. And then the CEO told the customer, 12 months. The customer went, what am I supposed to do with that information? I need proof that you're doing this. So again, it went down to the IT manager and he said, well, I don't control that system. I need to go check with ops. So the IT manager went to operations. Operations then logged into the systems, took a screenshot of something and sent it back. Said, here, this proves that we're there. It then went all the way back up, went back out to the customer. The customer said, this could have been at any time, anywhere. This doesn't prove anything to me. Can you show me that you have a policy in place and that you're doing this regularly? And again, it went down. Now the IT manager had to do even more work. He had to figure out a policy. So he went to HR and legal. He had to go back to operations to find a continuous way to provide this kind of information. They had to pull in all these other people, explain the context of what's going on, and get all this work done. Now, if we just look at something like policies, maybe you have one document for that policy. But if you ever have to go through an audit of it, you probably have the policy, the versions of the policy, the paper trail of the policy of who approved it and all the changes that were made beyond that. You probably have metadata connected to it. You probably have all the personnel who might have need to sign it as well. And all of this might live in different places. That's just for the policy. We're not even talking about the evidence, issues with the evidence, remediation of those issues, and potential risks associated with them. Now, this is a real use case. This is for just data retention. If you look at ISO specifically, ISO has about 24 different policies. If you need to do this level of work for 24 different policies, you immediately see how that 1,000 hours seems like an understatement. And that's just for one framework. So how does Drata help? Well, within Drata, you might have this control. So maybe this request comes down, hey, do we do a data retention policy? And maybe someone along the way, let's say the COO, a CISO, a head of compliance, he said, well, Ryan's responsible for this. Ryan is the IT manager. Great. Ryan logs into Drata and he has this control. He logs in and it says, well, do we have a documented and implemented policy for data retention? Mentions it and the period, but they're retained. Great. Ryan knows what he needs to do. For that policy, maybe he's going to add other owners. He's going to say, I need legal to look at this and I need HR to understand this as well. Great. They're now added in as people in here as well. Maybe the CISO or maybe Ryan says, great, I need information from these other people, but I'm going to set myself up as the approver. I don't want to say that this is good and have my name connected to something wrong without me saying yes. Excellent. There's going to be an approver. Maybe they create a task. Maybe he needs legal to read something. Legal check. He's going to assign this to whoever's in legal, Alini. And I want Alini to do this legal check by the 21st of March. That's a task I've assigned. Alini now knows what she needs to do. Maybe there's a ticket associated or something similar. But under this, then we start seeing all that evidence. So we've not just set up the work, we've not just delegated it and had tasks and streamlined the workflow, but we also have the actual evidence that we need to know as well. So in Drata, we can see, well, is the data retention policy in place? Has the period been specified? And is it before the renewal date? So we're checking the evidence Drata. Do we have this policy and have we done all the right things? Yes, great. That's what the customer wants to see. Oh, and by the way, we have that policy, but can we prove that we're doing it every day? Yes, we can. Drata is running a test against a data center or something similar that's saying, yes, we have this log retention going. And yes, I have evidence of it. Maybe we even want to see the specific policy linked in Drata that has all of those additional documents connected to it. And all of this is centralized. So instead of chasing people back and forth, having different calls, not writing down the correct notes everywhere, we've centralized all this information into one spot. Now, when we take a closer look at this as well, you might have noticed you see these other framework codes under here. This data retention policy, at no point does it only mention ISO. Does it say this is ISO 27001? In fact, this is relevant for a whole host of them. NIS2, DORA potentially, PCI, FedRAMP, HIPAA, you name it. So by doing all this work once, by having that conversation with legal, with HR, with operations once, I've documented it properly to build that into the frameworks that I might need to be audited for, or I might need a certification for. This is then power, this is that overlap. So if controls are growing in different frameworks, right, maybe they are, but I don't have to duplicate all of that work. I might just have an additional control in here that I need to get to an automatic state within Drata. Now, if we go back to that evidence that we saw of sort of checking things like data retention, you start seeing our monitors. Now, these monitors are very powerful. What they're doing is they're pulling JSON information, changing that information into evidence, and determining whether or not you're compliant. So if we look at just any of these, right, web application firewall in place, or employees have unique infrastructure accounts, you're seeing a lot of failures. You're seeing that they're on, you're seeing the categories they're under, and you're getting prompted to fix a failure. So if I click on any of these tests, I'm told what the test is doing, what the result is, whether I failed and I'm not compliant, what I need to do to become compliant, or what the actual issue is, where this issue takes place, and then how to fix it, together with a wiki article on how to fix it more. Now, Drata, as a compliance platform, will not take over the security aspect of remediating. We can advise you, but we do not want to be that platform. What you can do is you can fix it and send it to the correct team who might have access. Right? Ryan might not have access to fix this specific issue, but someone in a sysadmin might. So then he can create a ticket for that sysadmin. But what you're doing is you're building evidence every single day of every single test, understanding what needs to be fixed and how it needs to be fixed. So if I have this evidence, I can then really talk to a customer who says, well, I need evidence of whether you're doing this accurately or not. This could also be for an audit or another situation. But Drata is providing you a watermark timestamp PDF every day. Yeah, we failed this test on the 11th of March. You asked about this day. What this test is doing is saying which users don't have this. Great. We have some exclusions built into place. There were service accounts, and we've done a user access review to prove it. And then under that, we have this JSON information. Now, this is where we provide the logic. We're not just saying we failed and saying trust us, or we're not saying we passed and say trust us. We're saying we've determined that there's a failure, and that failure is based on the logic that in here, an email is not associated. It hasn't been connected. It's not a service account, which hasn't been flagged. An MFA isn't on. That is a non-compliant identity. We've seen that also for Juan. We've seen that also for watchdog test account. Okay. And we see this everywhere. Now I show you this JSON information because now we come back to the custom connector. If we have a JSON schema, we can start building custom tests. I'm just going to give this a random name to show this. And this is also a new innovation. What we're able to do is you're able to build the same logic and these same tests in Drata in a no-code way. For the purposes of the demos, I just have providers on here, but with those custom connectors, we would have the JSON schema information. So for this one, let's say I'm building a test on AWS on my infrastructure, and I think all results must pass. What I'm going to do, because again, I have the JSON information, I'm going to choose any of the services that are under here. And I'll just click something like Lambda. That's maybe a boring one. Let me just choose something maybe a little bit more interesting, maybe ECS. Let's just do ECS service containers. Fantastic. And here on the right, you have this resource guide. This is where that JSON schema is. So if I look for ECS service, I get an attribute library that's written like this. And for a lot of people, this doesn't make too much sense. But what we've done is we've translated what all of this means so that you can build accurate tests. What does the term alarms actually mean? Right? The mapping of a metric alarm name to the metric alarms for all of these things. Maybe CPU utilization, all of this information. Again, we have this schema because you've provided it on these other connections that you might have made. So I can then very easily select the attributes that I want to look at. Alarms exists true, great, I need that. And I'd like to run another check in the same thing that's connected to it. And I need tags, maybe we're using specific tags. Yeah, right. I'm just filling in random things here, but what I'm doing is I'm building that logic. So in the same way that I just showed that other evidence, we can build evidence for anything. An OT check, an IoT check, a quality check. As long as the information we can read out, you can build it in this way and get that same compliance workflow of the next steps you need to take. Being able to build out like this is how you really start scaling a compliance program. I will preface, this is a little bit of advanced usership. Sure, this is no code logic, but this is when you're really building something further. It could also just be you're trying to do base checks, but you have very custom infrastructure that you want to be running this on. So the Drata check might not be exactly what you're looking for there. Very simple to do. Again, this speaks to being able to look at on-premise systems, being able to look at a broader variety of frameworks. And speaking of frameworks, we saw that those controls overlap these different frameworks. So what you'll see as an organization when you filter up is that you can say, well, I'm doing DORA and I'm 68% ready, and I'm doing GDPR and that's 63%. I'm also PCI DSS and that's 85%. You might not have worked from this view. You might have only worked in the controls and then seen that by doing these controls, you've equaled a lot of the things within these frameworks. Again, with these custom connectors and custom controls that you might be working, you might want custom frameworks. Maybe you have a customer that has a very specific question. Great. You can build your own framework for Drata as well and see that overlap and build this scalability. Now, assuming you get these things to a high enough number, maybe you want to do an audit or something similar. But oftentimes what happens, like within my initial example, a customer is asking you for something. As Stan said in his initial introduction, he mentioned one of the things that's really saving them time is security questionnaires. With NIST2, everyone is sending security questionnaires. They're being sent out constantly. And what happens is maybe a sales guy gets that, or maybe it's already more of an existing relationship. Maybe an IT guy gets it. That's sent to them, and then they have to go figure out that information. But it might have questions about policies where they need to check with legal in case something changed, something that maybe HR has an impact in. A sysadmin might have done something, a third party that he needs to talk about, but maybe those things change. So it's always trying to get up-to-date information, and those are in different locations. What you can do in Drata, and this says beta here, this is changing very soon, and I'll show you why in a second here. But what you can do with these questionnaires is you can choose sources. So you can say, great, I'm going to use AI, but I want it to only pull information from my active controls in Drata or from sub-processor lists or policies I have. Maybe I have previous questionnaires that I answered before I stepped over to this that I want to answer within here. And we can connect to a whole host of different systems. It doesn't have to purely be Drata. You could have this in SharePoint. We can connect with those things. You can provide us a knowledge base in order to answer these things. But what it then allows you to do, as Stan said, is add a questionnaire, and we can ingest a whole variety of different file types. But we'll then answer things for you. Please provide work email. Okay, that's that person. When did your company complete its last pen test? Well, we do one every 12 months. Maybe for more information, ask further. It could be, do you do STAST or DAST? Yes, we do this for all released code. Static application security testing, it happens there in this. And that was sourced from this questionnaire. We've answered all these things automatically. It won't do everything for you, but it'll easily save you probably 80% of the hours you might have taken. So every security review that's coming in, you can answer that quickly. This saves a lot of teams a lot of time, and a lot of that time isn't seen because it's chasing each other. Now, this is when you get a questionnaire. That's already interesting, right? Answering these questionnaires faster. If you're in Drata, excellent, you can do this. But what about asking your third parties? Within Dora and NIST2, I believe they're asking for 7 layers of third parties. In here, we have what's being called vendor risk management. This is where you can map out the risks that you have with all of your third parties, maybe sub-processors, maybe they're just suppliers, non-IT suppliers. This company only delivers desk materials to us. Great, maybe they still have information of you. So you can have all these vendors within Drata, you can map out risks on them associated to them. But something very exciting that we're doing, especially when you look again at these security questionnaires and similar, is an acquisition that we made. Just a little bit over a month ago, we acquired a company called SafeBase. SafeBase was and is the market leader of trust centers. Trust centers are a publicly displayed web page where you can talk about your compliance posture. So if I look at Dratas, for instance, or if any of you want to look at Dratas, today you can go to trust.drata.com, and this is what you'll see. We've provided you our compliance information. We've told you we use Zapier, and there was a breach, but we weren't affected by it. You can read more. Maybe you want to see which compliance frameworks we have. Maybe you want to see which third parties we have. Maybe you want to read documents, get access to them. You'll need to sign an NDA to download some of these documents, but the information is there for you. And we even provide real-time information on the checks that we're doing. Maybe for you to work with us, you're very concerned about sub-processors. That's normal. Our headquarters is in the US. As an EU company, this would be a question for you. Here's that information. You can see our sub-processors. You can see our DPAs connected to all of this and understand what's happening. And any customer of Drata's can do this because of this SafeBase acquisition. Now, if we go back to here, what you start seeing in this vendor approach is you start seeing this safe-based logo everywhere. So let's say you're a new customer and you want to add one of your vendors on it. Let's say it's Okta. Instead of having to start this fresh and saying, well, here's Okta, here's my information, I'm going to go do research on them and figure out what information I need, we'll already link their safe base to you. So when you start, you say Okta, great. All of your research is already done. You can say, excellent. What I needed to see is that we work in Germany, so they need C5. Okay, that's good. We also need to see ISO 27001, and we also have German automotive industry, so they need TSOC. Great, I see this. I want to go download their reports. Excellent. They'll be in here. You can download them straight from here and have this information. So suddenly you've cut away so much time in order to do these vendor assessments quickly. This is how you really start speeding up your compliance journey, doing it a lot faster. This is what's live today. If we talk a little bit about roadmap, the reason that we acquired SafeBase is so that we could move faster and further. In Drata before, we already had a trust center. And realistically, it was a decent trust center. You could do some of the work, but SafeBase was only focused on that and only focused on features that would take that further. And we just didn't have the bandwidth. So with this acquisition, we have their team as well. And we start coming into an area where we start looking at continuous third-party risk management. If you look at legislation like NIS2 and DORA, it's clear that what the regulators want is that you are continuously busy with compliance, that you are always looking at the issues within your third parties and understanding where there might be a critical vulnerability. What's not possible to do today is exactly that. It is impossible to ask Okta or CrowdStrike or Microsoft every day, hey, what's going on, right? Is there an issue here? Do we need to understand something further? Typically, what you would do is once a year, you're going to go run that check, and auditors and regulators are okay with that. What we're trying to do is we're trying to give more insights to the inside of the house. Right? All of us have NDAs here. All the customers have this. Maybe they're just safe-based customers. Maybe they're Drata customers. But where we want to get to is that within Drata, we can report in real time on things like these controls. So maybe your once a year vendor risk management control or security review is checking at data breach notifications or maybe bot mitigation or that a pen test happened. And you check that on day one, and on day two, that already broke. The vision for us is that we're able to report on this in real time. So any of the vendors that you have in here, you'll be able to get a notification that says, well, I did my security review of Okta 3 months ago, but 3 months down the line, something broke. I now have a notification that says, well, one of their controls went out, and that's a control that we find is important. Right? We now have a real-time understanding of internal workings of Okta. We don't have all the information and all of the sensitive data, but we know that something is wrong according to what we're looking for in a security review. Now your company has that information and has the power to do something about it. Maybe that means that you note down a risk. Maybe it means that you need to look around for another vendor. Maybe it means something completely different that you can ignore it, but at least from an auditor or regulation perspective, you have access to this information. And then you're able to share this across, and everyone will save a lot of time on security reviews and similar. I've talked a lot. I've said a lot of different words in this presentation so far. I think I've covered a lot of the big pieces that I wanted to look at today. Right? I started the presentation by being able to talk about things. What is Drata doing? What are the issues we see in the market? Right? Rising time to compliance, spending more on it. Third-party requests for being able to do all of this. The general cost is going up of it. Been able to show you what Drata does a little bit. Been able to show you some of the new features, such as connecting to on-premise systems, the custom tests that we're running, how workflows and tasks can work in Drata, and finally, how we manage these third parties, and a little bit of the roadmap into what we're going to be doing more with third parties. Hopefully, this has provided a lot of information so far. I know that we have a bit of time left over. That was purposeful as well. In case there are any questions, comments, feelings, anything is possible.
All right. Thank you very much, Andreas. We do have a question. So the first one is, trust other companies. Hey, you talk about trust all the time, but what about zero trust?
Yeah, good question. I did talk about trust a lot. I think I was counting for myself. I think I said it about 32 times during the presentation, so I'll say it a few more times now. The difference between trust and zero trust is a good one. I think I'd like to start it by saying that when we mean trust, we mean it from a compliance perspective. When we talk about zero trust, we're talking about a security perspective. Now, this opens up a whole debate on should compliance and security equal one another. I think anyone who's been in the market long enough knows that that's not the case. Right? Compliance hasn't equaled security for a while. There's companies that can be secure and companies that can be compliant. What you see with Drata and what we're really trying to do is build that bridge from compliance to security. We're trying to say, well, we're running automatic monitors. We're not the security layer of it, but we're trying to enforce compliance in an easier way, in a more transparent way, so that you can be secure. Instead of saying, I ran that check once so that my ISO auditor was happy and it looks like I'm compliant, I can do that every day and build that bridge to compliance. So I think where zero trust says, don't trust anyone, always verify. From our perspective, when we say trust, I think we mean more trust, but verify, right? That you are doing these things, you do have the certifications, you are running these controls, but that you can always verify this information. That, as I said, with the roadmap and the vision, that we can take that step to say, well, in more or less real time, we can tell you if controls are falling out of compliance. You're verifying that the things you've done on your security review are happening. So I think that's more what we mean with trust, more from that compliance layer than pure the security layer. I'm not saying don't do zero trust, far from it. I think that's also important, but I think it's important to make that distinction between compliance and security.
All right, that's clear. Thank you. Another question. I've got a use case for Trust Center, but we're not ready for the entire GRC platform yet. Can I just use that specific module or feature?
Yeah. It's a very good question. I'd be interested to hear the use case. We hear a lot of different use cases for this. I've seen use cases where companies think they're not mature enough to use all of Drata, right? Being able to see, well, all of these individual checks and balances in here and doing all the rest. Maybe the company's not ready, but they're doing something. We have other ones that are using legacy tools that are still using something like Archer on their systems, where they're saying, well, it's not a good time to step over into Drata, but we do want to start bragging about the things we're doing. We do need to ease the burden on our IT manager and legal and everyone who needs to check this kind of information and make that more streamlined. In the past, it wasn't possible in order to have Trust Center separately. You had to buy all of Drata in order to get a Trust Center. With the acquisition of SafeBase, we're now able to offer that as a module. So it is now possible to just procure Trust Center. Right? And it would look similar to what we've already shown here. Right? I'll just take the Okta one as an example, where you just have this Trust Center. Now, the way that you feed this information can be from a whole host of places. You could connect to Drata, for instance, which would be a very easy connector. Maybe you have a different way of building your knowledge base. Maybe it's connected into a SharePoint environment, into a legacy tool, where you still get some of this information. The connector might be, I'll say, less deep for some of these things, but you do get this kind of information in there as well. So Drata is possible to do this sort of modular approach. Maybe you're a company who says, I just want to start with Drata and I don't need a full-blown Trust Center yet. That's also possible. We have some companies who say we don't want to show anything to the market until we're more or less ready yet. So since, I'd say, a few weeks, we're able to offer this as a modular approach. The official announcement of this is coming out, I believe, later this week.
All right, thank you. Last question. We have a need for stricter regulations for a specific business unit. How could we do that with Drata?
Yeah, it's a very good question. We see this a lot, whether it's specific business units, different locations, different products within tools as well. It's able to do this. Now, I can answer this in slightly two ways, and it's good that this was after the previous question on being able to have modules in this as well. What Drata offers is what we call workspaces. Workspace is actually multi-tenancy. Right? What you're able to do is have different workspaces that are covering potentially different frameworks. So you can turn them on and off as you see fit, but you buy the framework as a whole. So this one has 13 frameworks enabled. If I go to one of the other ones, this one has 12 enabled, right? We have one fewer, and there's a different status. So this feature could be used for potentially different geolocations, business units, or similar that have different levels they want to look at. Someone as potentially a managed service provider or as a CISO or something similar could still have global views of this to understand, well, one of my frameworks is closer to a compliance standard that I want than the other one. I can see where things are going wrong and still have that take there. This is within Drata itself. What you can also do on SafeBase, and I'll call it SafeBase, it's SafeBase by Drata, is here you can have this similarly as well. In this, it's called products, but this could be used for something like geolocations. As mentioned, it could be that you have C5 certifications and maybe Okta has a branch only in Germany that has this. But you can do the same thing on your trust center, that you show a different level of compliance in there. I could also, for instance, go to, I believe it's this, trust.crowdstrike.com. In here as well, you see their compliance posture, but maybe you're only using Falcon Shield. So maybe you yourself or one of the companies you're looking at is only using a specific element of an organization that might have a separate compliance status. That's in here as well. So you can see, well, I only use Falcon Shield. I only have this information to work with, a network diagram, for instance. So it is possible to break this out by business units, geolocations, whatever you might see fit in order to switch these things.
Okay, thanks. That was clear. So I think we can wrap it up. Thanks everyone for joining us today. If you have any questions, you can reach out to Andreas from Drata. You can reach out to Exclusive, to me or one of your account managers. We are all here to help you out. So thanks again and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, Andreas.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.